I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Tim Lyons. Tim is a 16-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department, currently serving as lieutenant in the borough of Queens. And until recently he worked as an emergency room RN at a level 1 trauma center. That's pretty cool. Tim, I want to just let you, well, first of all, let me say thank you for coming on the podcast. I definitely appreciate your time.
Yeah, Jason, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've got kids running around just like I do, so it's finding the time is always the challenge.
Yes, sir.
So if you would, Tim, why don't you just give us a bit of your background, tell us your story, and we can then tie it into real estate as we move along.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, I think I have a pretty cool story, or so I've been told, but it's my life, right? So I just think it's normal. But to other people, they're like, wow, like you're a New York City firefighter, you were an ER nurse, and now you're in real estate. Like, how does that work? And it's a pretty cool story to tell. But I mean, I love to tell it because it's kind of like a lot of other people's stories. I was just a regular guy, married with 3 little girls. They're now 10, 8, and 2. And I was just working like everybody else, trying to make it happen, pay the bills, go on vacation a couple times a year, and just live a nice life. And, I think growing up with some humble beginnings, I think shaped my money mindset and my outlook on life and finances and where I wanted to be and what kind of job I should have. And for a long time, I subscribed to the, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, max out the 401k, pay off your debts, pay off your house as soon as possible. And, one day you'll be able to retire and enjoy life. And I think, that's what I got from my parents. And that's what they got from their parents. And, it took me until my mid 30s to kind of be like, well, wait a minute, I'm kind of working a lot. I was working 24-hour shifts in the firehouse. I had gone back to school while being a full-time firefighter, went back to nursing school and got my nursing degree and became a ER nurse. And I was working 12-hour shifts there. And, before I knew it, a couple of kids later, my wife wanted to stay home for a few years, and we wanted her to have that time with the kids. I was working 80, 90 hours a week overtime, and I was stuck in that proverbial rat race, that W-2 grind. And I just knew there had to be a better way. And I love being a New York City firefighter. I have the biggest smile on my face to this day when I show up to the firehouse, or I'm sitting in traffic driving to the firehouse, because I just know that I love that job. But there's been times in my life where I kind of felt a little bit underemployed, as a college graduate. We can dive into why I became a fireman. But there's been times where I thought, I should be, do, and have more. And I think that's when I really got on the personal development, kind of bandwagon, if you will, and started listening to some of the personal development greats like Jim Rohn and the others like him, and reading their books. And then I started getting into podcasts, and I was like, wait a minute, there's a whole world out there that I don't even know about. And real estate was one of those things that I kind of just said to myself, one day when I have more information, one day when I have more money, one day I'll get into that. And I actually now know there's a term for that called the arrival fallacy, or the destination fallacy. The one day syndrome, one day I'll do this and one day I'll do that. So that's really like my background, and I'd be more than happy to unpack any piece of that. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And there's a bunch of things that I think will be great to talk about. But first thing, because I've never heard this term before, so the arrival fallacy or destination fallacy. So that sounds I mean, I've never heard that term before. Where did you get that? What kind of, what's the
Hmm.
meaning behind that? It sounds like something that, yeah, probably a lot of people have.
Yeah, I mean, I now that you put me on the spot, I have no idea where I exactly heard it, and I should probably find that out
You
because I
probably made
kind of
it up
use it a
then.
lot. Yeah,
It's
maybe it's
your
fake
original
news.
idea.
No, like yeah, like the arrival fallacy, like, or the destination fallacy. Once I get to this place in my life, then I'll be able to do something else, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with that internally, with that internal self-talk of I'll be happy when, or
Yeah.
I'll be satisfied when this happens, or I get to do X, or I make this amount of sales, or whatever it might be, whether it's your job or your family or your relationships. I think we have a lot of that inside of us. And for me, sometimes you don't know what the self-talk is trying to tell you, or you don't know how to decode it, or and I think when I heard that term, it just really resonated with me in a big way. And I said, you know what, like, I have to stop waiting for something to happen. No one's coming to rescue me. Nothing's going to just pop out and there's nothing that I can manifest that's going to pop out and just, provide abundance of riches, when you hear some of these
Right.
people talk, right? And so I decided just to take action. I'm a pretty conservative guy growing up with money and finances and taking risk. So I think a lot of the barriers to doing something that not a lot of other people do is that oh, that could be risky. Like,
Yeah.
I heard about real estate, or I heard about house flipping, or my Uncle Joe got burned one time, so real estate stinks and I'd never do that. Or and there's a lot of limiting beliefs that that I would have as an individual, but the people in my circle would also have. So it took me a long time to kind of figure this out. And I love when people ask me the question, what would you do differently if you knew then what you know now? And I think almost everybody, including myself, says, I wish I would have started earlier.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's a very common, I think, sentiment there, that it's just like, and I feel that way. It's like, had I known what I know now and started the process like 10 years ago, uh, well, I'd be like one of those people that started 10 years ago, right? You'd be,
Right.
all those people are doing fantastic right now. So it's just kind of that these, the limiting beliefs, the ideas of, I'll do it someday, when I get, that you're going to get there to this certain point and then you'll be able to, whatever it is, invest in real estate, whatever the then is. But it's a really good point, because I think, almost everybody does it with some aspect in their life, and many of us do it like with multiple aspects. But the financial side of it is that, you talked about it before, that you do kind of what you're taught, or what you see, what's, sort of put out there as normal, and then you see everything else as risky, right? Just because
Mhm.
it's not what everybody's doing. But it's, if once you get educated in it, I think you would probably agree that it's probably more risky to keep doing the normal, right? Keep doing what is considered, the 9 to 5 jobs, the 401ks, all of that stuff. You're essentially putting your reliance in everything on someone else, right? It's
Yeah.
no, right? There's no, it's, if you have a job, doesn't matter how well it pays. Like, if you work for someone else and you get laid off, you don't have a job anymore. So there's a lot to it, that you're putting all of that in someone else's hands. And so being educated on it, I think, is extremely important. You mentioned we could talk about what led you to become a firefighter. Um, I maybe have a little bit of a guess based on the timing, but what's the story behind that?
Yeah. So as a little kid, I just couldn't not stare at the fire trucks. I couldn't not watch Rescue 911 or any of those types of shows growing up. And when I was 8 years old, Santa Claus brought me, or maybe I was nine, I think I was 9 years old. Santa Claus brought me a police scanner, which, if your listeners don't know what a police scanner is, it's like a little CB looking radio that you could listen to the local fire station and the local police station. and hear their radio transmissions in real time. So I used to attach it to my bike, and I would follow the local fire engines all around town, and I could just never shake it. I just loved it. And growing up right outside of New York City, in a town called Mineola, which is located on Long Island, a lot of my friends' dads were New York City firefighters, and they seemed to be always home and coaching our teams, and they had a nice little life, and I was always like, oh man, that sounds really cool, um, so then I go to college, and I had these dreams of being a physician, and I like to joke that I was pre-med for about 15 minutes until I joined a fraternity, and um, the rest is history on that one. But 9/11 happened when I was in college, and I think it hit home, because I just knew that a lot of people were going to be affected, and I wasn't sure to what extent. I wasn't sure whose mom and dad worked where, or brother and sister worked where, but I just knew, being away at school, that this was gonna not be good. And I have friends who lost parents, friends who lost siblings, cousins, um, and it was really bad. And then came word that my uncle Al, who was a captain in the New York City Fire Department, was actually buried under Tower 2 when it came down, and he was actually deemed one of the last people to be pulled out alive. Spent several weeks in the ICU across the river at Jersey City Medical Center, and he's still alive to this day. But that week after 9/11 happened, and being far from home, and I just made a decision. I'm like, I'm going to be a New York City fireman. I mean, I just watched the news for like a week straight, and I saw these guys walking into the building, walking up the stairs, and attempting to go put this fire out. Like, they weren't even like
Heroes.
second even guessing. They just said, oh, look at that, that's a crazy fire, let's go put it out. So I think all that kind of really hit home for me. And even though I graduated college, I just really was focused on becoming a New York City fireman. So 2 weeks after graduation, I was in the academy, and, as they say, the rest is history. So that was my story about being a New York City firefighter.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, true. True heroes. I mean, it was, I'm sure that inspired many people at that time to, want to be firefighter, I guess, wherever, but yeah, particularly New York City is just held in such high esteem after 9/11. So it was very commendable. So I guess in your journey, when did you really start to kind of steer towards real estate? How did you get started and kind of go down that road?
Yeah, I mean, for as long as I can remember, like, people around me that had money or had means or had wealth or appeared to have wealth, they were somehow connected to real estate, right? Either they fixed and flipped homes, or they owned some sort of real estate. They owned a building, they owned a commercial property. And I remember as a kid, because we didn't have a ton of money growing up, I just remember saying to myself, man, I'm going to do real estate one day. Like, look at this guy. He's got the Lexus or the Mercedes, whatever. But then, like, life got in the way, and went to college, became a fireman. But I never really like let it go. Like, I started reading the Wall Street Journal every day in college, and that kind of habit persisted after college. And I kind of became a personal finance buff, reading personal finance books. And, it was kind of like the same type of topics, right? Have 6 months of emergency funding, max out your 401k, get some mutual funds, keep it real simple, conservative, and no one really talked about real estate. And it also seemed at the same time, though, that, I needed like a PhD to do real estate. I was just confused by it. Like, it just seemed like unattainable. I never thought I would have the money to do it. And part of that is, I thought that I had to do it in New York, and I live, in the greater New York City area. So the home prices are outrageous, right? So when you talk about like the 1% rule, the purchase price versus the gross rents of a property, people were could achieve that as little as a couple of years ago. That was not even close, in my area. And the people who would buy, properties would a lot of times just buy them in the hopes that they'd look like a hero in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. when it appreciated. But in the meantime, they'd be paying maybe $500 to $1,500 a month out of pocket just to have that property, even though it was rented out. So like I really didn't understand that it was possible to invest out of state or in syndications or note investing or any of that stuff. I just never knew it existed. So, when I finally decided to read a book that I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about, Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, this book had sat in my firehouse overnight bag for over a year, and I never read it. And summer of 19, July of 19, I'm on a family vacation in the Outer Banks, North Carolina, and I read it and I couldn't put it down. It took me 2 days, and I just like flew through that book, and my kids were hanging on top of me. I'm building a sandcastle with one hand and have the book in the other. Like I just literally couldn't put it down because I felt like the lights were turned on, the curtain was raised, and I could see for the first time. Like it was crazy. That's how powerful that book was. And I remember telling my wife on the beach that day, I said, babe, I'm going to be a real estate investor, and she knows that I'm very, if I put my mind to something, I'm going to go do it. She had watched me go through nursing school. She has watched me do all these things, study for lieutenant, everything. So she said, all right, Tim, that sounds great. Let me know how that works. I'll support you, Well, 4 months later, I was closing on a 3-family property, and that was my first rental that I self-managed. And I'm not a particularly handy guy, but I kind of figured it out along the way and rehabbed one of the units. We put siding and roof on the house, or I should say I paid somebody to put siding and a roof on the house.
Yeah. I was like, you did that and you're not handy. That's impressive.
No. Yeah. And, within a few months, like we had the proof of concept, right? We had the cash flow coming in. It was fully rented. And we did a little better on our taxes. And my wife's like, wow, like this is going to work. Let's go buy 30 of these things, and I was like, yeah. And, what I realized very quickly, and I'm glad I realized it, that quickly, was that buying 100 to 110-year-old wood frame structures may not be the most scalable or smart process, right? Because I was going to be buying something each and every time. And I wanted to buy the 3 or the 4-plex because of the scalability, right? If you buy a single family rental and somebody moves out, well, then you're on the hook until you get another renter in there. The 3-family gave me that comfort, knowing that if 1 or 2 people moved out, I'd still be able to maintain that property without sweating, right? But buying the deferred maintenance disaster one after the other it wasn't enticing. It didn't excite me. So I had been hearing about the multifamily investing and on podcasts and reading books about it. And I was very intrigued, but I was a little bit nervous. Like I didn't understand the language, cap rates, NOI, profit and loss statements. It felt like it was something that, some Wall Street private equity guy would be better suited to do versus Tim the fireman, Tim the ER nurse, But once I became committed to the process about learning commercial real estate, learning multifamily, I went out and I got a coach and a mentor, and that really moved the needle and collapsed timeframes in a big way. It was just learning the language. It was just like learning any other language, and networking and surrounding yourself with great people, and that's what I did. And by doing that, I was able to get into a 43 unit property in Pennsylvania very quickly. Within 6 months of being kind of mentored. And, as they say, the law of the first deal kicks in, and very quickly 2 became 3 and 3 became 6 and 6 is now, I think, 11. So yeah, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that a couple of things you did that are so important and seem like in hindsight obvious, but I think what a lot of people miss is you did something, right? You took action, you went and you decided you were going to do this. You bought 3-family, you realized that's not scalable, but at least it's a start, and you did something, and then, kind of moved on from there. So I think the taking action piece and the love, the first deal, is obviously, I think, something that gets, sort of talked about a lot, but it maybe sounds like a cliche, but it's so true. It's like you do one of these bigger deals, and you get it closed, and then suddenly everybody believes that you can do it. So you go from being really needing someone to take a chance on you to being like a proven commodity. And now it's like, sure, what, here's a bunch of deals for you to look at, and you can, kind of go through it without as much trepidation. So um, now, you're well along. What do you, I guess, within your company, what's your focus? What do you like to do? And, there's a lot of different hats to wear in syndication, but what is your specific role? Or are you kind of still doing it all? What do you enjoy?
Yeah, so and when I say we, it's my brother Greg and I, we are the principals of Cityside Capital. We very quickly realized that commercial real estate was going to be a team sport. We had heard that term a bunch of times, but I guess until you're actually around the people doing it, right, you really understand that it is a team sport. So living in New York, I wasn't going to be moving my family to one of these hot markets in Texas or Arizona or Florida, and neither was he. So we weren't going to be boots on the ground, and we were brand new. So I don't think anybody was going to be trusting our underwriting for a little bit. And we didn't exactly have the asset management skills either, but we were learning, and we were surrounded by great people doing it. But what we could do, which we didn't know that we could do, is that we could raise capital. So when we got into our first deal with my mentor, I got a great behind the scenes look on how syndication works. And I didn't even know what syndication really was. I mean, I was looking to buy a 6 or a 12 unit property with my dad, my brothers, and maybe a friend. But when I found out what syndication was and I got a front row seat, I was blown away. And at the end of the process, my coach was asking me, Tim, could you want to give raising capital a shot? Because he was trying to push me out of my comfort zone. And I said, well, Chris, I don't even know if I can raise $5, man. I can't commit to anything. I mean, I don't even don't wait for me, basically, Yeah. And, he said, well, give it a shot, talk to your friends and family and whatever. So, the thing that was holding me back the most was that I was committed to the process. I was educated at that point. I understood the whole thing, but, the people around me didn't, and they didn't also know me as Tim, the real estate investor. They knew me as Tim, the fireman, Tim, the ER nurse. And that was my identity. And that was a big thing that kind of held me back in the beginning, was that I wasn't able to step into that new identity of, now I'm a real estate investor and I have a really good opportunity, potentially good opportunity for my friends and family to be involved. And I didn't know how to communicate that. So, I mean, what I did was, in the beginning, I got a bunch of emails out to people, invited them onto the webinar, and ended up raising $150,000 for that first deal. And then Greg and I invested ourselves, and that deal was going great still. And I think the people that came with us have now gone into several deals on that after that first one. But and then, just like anything else, it spreads, right? The word of mouth spreads. Hey, Tim and Greg are doing this. This is what I'm doing. Then we obviously got a website, and we started a company, and we started posting on social media, because as we got into this, we had to really step into that new role and that new identity. And because we did that, our growth has just been, explosive.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really great point about, sort of reestablishing your identity. Are you still working as a firefighter and a nurse, or have you kind of stepped away from that?
No. So when I got into this real estate game, my wife very quickly was like, dude, two jobs is like a lot, but 3 is too many. So, and I tended to agree. So, so I retired from being a nurse, February of 2020, right before COVID.
Okay. Well, that's maybe a good time to not be dealing with that. But I mean, back to the identity piece, because I think it's something that a lot of people starting out struggle with it. And you mentioned that you weren't a Wall Street banker, you're not, hedge fund manager, VC capital, like most people aren't, right? And most of the people that at least I've talked to on the podcast or heard on other people's podcasts, they don't come from that background. It's interesting that it seems like a lot of the people that are syndicating are engineers, doctors, firefighters, like service industry type people. And it's a lot of tech people. I mean, there's quite a diverse background. And so you do really have to establish, sort of a new identity. And I find the hardest time I have with raising capital, the biggest, like, at least mental hurdle for me, is actually talking to like close friends and family. It's yeah, I find that that's where I get nervous, right? My family that's known me forever, and it's like, you wanted to be a vet when you were a kid. What are you doing now? Like, you went to school and trained for forever. Why are you doing this? And it's like, and they're not saying that. I'm just mostly saying in my head, like, oh, they're not going to listen to me about this. And so I just,
Yes.
I don't know if you ran into the same thing, like the guys that you worked with at the firehouse, were they kind of receptive, or how did you approach that? I guess, because I think, it's, I'm working through it myself too, but I do think that's a thing that probably anyone starting out and raising capital, that's a big deal, right? Because you're not like, nobody comes out of high school and, I'm Jason the capital raiser. That's just doesn't seem to be
Right.
a thing. So I think that's a good, any tips, tricks, sort of how you addressed that could help our listeners would be awesome.
So I don't know that you want to hear about the firehouse that much, because those guys call me Lieutenant Madoff, and how they want to know how my Ponzi scheme's going. So, because they're a bunch of great guys and girls, and we have a lot of fun together, a lot of busting chops. But aside from all that, joking around, they all know what I'm doing now, and they're all into it. They want to know more about it, and I think I've paved the way for other people to kind of say, look, a lot of firefighters have second careers, because of our work schedule. And a lot of them do service type work, contractors, roofers, plumbers, electricians, stuff like that. But other guys are nurses and PAs and nurse practitioners and respiratory therapists and small business owners, so I think we're all in the same group. And I think what the best part about, no matter what you're doing out there, is that I think we all have a shared vision of what we want in life, right? We want more time freedom. We want more financial freedom. We want to be able to live where we want to live. We want to be able to associate and have relationships with whoever we want to have that with. And we want to have impact on people's lives, not only our own, but we want to have impact on other people's lives. So whether we can, identify that as clearly as I just did or not, I think we all kind of feel that way. So when you can connect with people on that kind of level, it doesn't really matter what you do for a living, because you can connect the dots very easily for people. And that's kind of what I've done with capital raising. If you listen to some of my first calls, you'd probably cringe. I know I would cringe, because I was probably spewing out cash on cash returns and equity multiples and internal rates of return and blah, 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 blah. And people were probably like, oh my God, what's this guy talking about?
Yeah.
But when you can invite somebody into a story, into a journey of real estate investing, from a W-2 to an entrepreneur, and really talk about those financial freedom, time freedom, geographical freedom, relationship freedom, and kind of build out that roadmap for them of what's possible and what's out there and what the vehicle of real estate can do for you, it's super powerful. And I mean, that's kind of been my, that would be my tip or trick for anybody who's out there, listening, who wants to raise capital or is doing it for the first time. That's been very powerful for me.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great point. And it's something that I think, as you go through that whole education piece, right? You figured out, okay, this is what I want to do. You dug in, you read the books, listened to the podcast, got a mentor. So now and it's, in order to sort of talk to the brokers and talk to other people in the business, that everybody says, like, you need to know the language. You need to speak to the to get the brokers to take you seriously. You need to know what you're talking about, which is true. But the flip side to that, and the point you just brought up, is a really great one, in that most of the people you're talking to about these opportunities for them to invest, that's not how they want to talk. They want to know, okay, why is Tim, who, great firefighter, great nurse, why is he doing this? Why would you take the chance? And which is, I think, what most people think. Why are you taking this risk and sort of, flipping your story but then so you get those questions, and now I don't, I don't know if you've, sort of felt the same, but I go through those conversations, and I'm almost like, it almost breaks my heart when I hear people with the objections and how they're, how risky it is, they think it is, and all of this. And I'm like, it's really not. Like, what we were doing before was risky. And it's just, you want to help them, and you feel like you found the way to help them. And so you're right. Like, just putting that out in the correct story form is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the more I'm doing this, and like, I'm still stepping into my identity as a real estate investor, as a connector of people and opportunities. But what's risky during COVID? There's plenty of physicians who are my friends who are now have invested with me, and I hear the same story every time I talk to one, that they couldn't do procedures in their surgical centers or at the hospital. So whether they were orthopedics or they were gastrointestinal, doctors, or plastic surgeons, or if they were even general surgeons, right? They weren't doing all the procedures, and that's where they make their money, right?
Yeah.
So they've spent all this time in college and medical school and residency and fellowships, and then digging themselves out of $300,000 or $400,000 of student loans and everything else. And now their whole existence is based upon one leg that's holding up their life, right? That one leg holding up I always talk about the marble tabletop. If you're a father, if you're a mother, and you're a high earner, right? Do you want to have just one leg, that one income stream holding up that marble tabletop that's, feeding your family and housing, your family and stuff like that? Or do you want to have multiple streams of income on a proven asset class that's been around for literally millennia? And it's just, it's mind boggling to you and I, but for the uninitiated, it's a process. And that's what I spend most of my time, putting out content, for beginners. Blog posts are focused on beginners. My videos, beginners. The new podcast I just launched, that's for, for people who are following the footsteps that I just kind of, of the journey that I just started.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, phenomenal points. It's the marble tables. I mean, it's something that I mean, like, I didn't think about it. I mean, I didn't think about it till a couple of years ago. It was like, but you get into that almost life cycle where it's like, okay, I have a wife, I have kids. My wife stays home with the kids. So now it's like, now you really do have just that one leg. Like, if all you have is a job, you have that one leg of the table. You don't even have necessarily a second like person that is bringing in income. It's like really, really all on you. And so you'll get into the cycle that you talked about, where you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, because almost you're in this panic mode of, I've got to make enough money to take care of my family, and like try to have some, be there also be some good, like some vacations and stuff like that. And it's just,
Yes.
It definitely, you get stuck in that I don't know, the rat race, that kind of cycle that's hard to get out of. And you really do have to change mindset, and you really do have to realize where the opportunities lie. And I think, in my opinion, like the rules behind syndication actually make it hard for people to get involved, where you can't, in a lot of instances, you have to be an accredited investor and things like that. But it's almost like they limit the opportunities for people. But I think, I actually like the 506B a lot, because then you can bring in, other people that maybe aren't already wealthy, and help them get to the point where they can at least be comfortable and maybe wealthy someday. So, yeah, I mean, all really, really great points. And I think, your tips on, kind of beginning capital raising space, it's all about just sharing your story and being convicted. I think believing it in yourself, believing that this is the way to go. So super cool. Tim, let me switch here, so I don't keep you all night long, but want to ask you some of the questions that I ask each guest. And the first one is related to the name of the show, being Know Your Why. And so what is your why, Tim? What drives you? What really makes you, kind of keep pushing?
Ooh, Man, this is a big question, right? Because this is what everything is predicated upon. So
Yeah.
it's certainly a fluid, it's almost like a fluid document that's floating around
Yeah.
my head. But,
Yeah.
I go back to it, I write down my goals and my vision and all that stuff. But really, the big why is, it's those five things I talked about, those five freedoms. And I'm borrowing that from a coach that I have been coaching with for the better part of last year. The time freedom, the financial freedom, the geographical freedom to live and go wherever you want to, and the relationship freedom to be surrounded by people that are going to empower you and support you, and kind of let go of those toxic relationships and people that maybe not be, who aren't as supportive. And having that impact, like, I just really have been focused on financial education, mindset, success, and spreading the word. And because that's what I'm passionate about. I want to have an impact on people's lives. And there's so much that I want to tell people, and we haven't even touched on taxes. I mean, I've been a tax fan now. Like, I read tax books. Like, I never thought that would happen.
Yeah, me too. Tax
Right.
podcasts. Like,
Oh,
like
tax
who am I? Yeah, it's
podcasts.
amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
So like one door has always opened up to another. But my why is really like it's the application of those five freedoms that I'm just so passionate about, and bring that to my family and my friends, and being able to be, live intentionally. And I think I was just, for the first 30 something years of my life, just kind of going through the motions. And it's a big regret of mine, because we only have a very finite amount of time on this planet to do all this stuff. And I'll be 40 I'll be 40 this year, and it sounds a little bit crazy to say that, but I'm just so happy that I've turned it around, and that I've begun to live more in a more intentional life, with the big why kind of as my beacon.
Yeah, that's people talk a lot about financial freedom or time freedom. That's a big topic on well, this and probably every podcast. But actually, the other ones that you talked about, I mean, that's I like that summary of it. I like that sort of encompassing all parts of your life. That's very cool to kind of break it down that way, because obviously they're all important. Tim, tell us something about yourself that maybe isn't common knowledge, something that is maybe a hobby or a special skill that you have.
I know you can't tell it by my physique, but I've been going to CrossFit for a couple of years. I just love the community aspect of it, and just moving my body and doing Olympic weightlifting sometimes. And so yeah, I do that. My wife and I do that. It's kind of like one of our things that we like to do together. And yeah.
Awesome. I've never done CrossFit, but I mean, I like exercise, so I think it's all of that sort of falls together. It's
It's
cool.
fun.
Yeah. People hear this, they want to reach out to you. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So the best way to connect with me would be through my new podcast called The Passive Income Brothers. It's me and my brother just chatting with some of these, people like ourselves, just coming on the journey. And then if you want to chat about real estate investing, or just want to hop on a call, just head on over to citysidecap.com. That's the website for our company, Cityside Capital. And we can connect there.
Awesome. Okay, and we'll put all that in the show notes. Final question, Tim, what is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who's, starting out, maybe a couple of years behind you, and just starting the journey? What would you tell them?
I would say, get educated and then take action, right? One of my mentors, Gino Barbaro, that's his equation. It sounds so simplistic and elementary. Education times action will lead to your results. And if we needed a PhD every time we needed to make a decision, then nobody would ever do anything. So just get out there, get educated, and take action.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You just got to start. Well, this has been great, Tim. I really appreciate it. I love sort of all I think we talked a lot about mindset as much as real estate, which is kind of one of my favorite topics, and I think incredibly important, especially when you're shifting that, as you talked about, your identity. What do I have to do to believe that I am now this new identity? And you can stay in both roles, but you have to believe in that second part. So Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Love it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, we will sign out. Have a great day, everyone. I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.